Hello, Hockey World. It is Thursday, September 18th, 2022.
I'm Michael Agello, and I really hate when I have phone issues in a foreign country.
I'm Russ Cohn from Sportsology.
Kevin Allen, Hockey Buzz.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes to you to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world, and we are close. Mike, you were in Toronto yesterday. Kevin, you were at the tournament tomorrow.
Yep, and going to the NHL Prospect Tournament in Traverse City, Michigan, which is just a lovely place for those
So
who
jealous.
Yeah, never been.
I'm going to
that, Kevin. Like next year, I'm just booking it. I want to go.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, kind of a resort area.
I heard from some of the Toronto writers that like the downtown is very quaint with coffee places and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm going to the Prospect Tournament in Buffalo, so it's just as quaint.
And I'm going to Allentown. No comment.
It's my place. So
Allentown, there you go. Hey,
no, so that's exciting, and we're getting there. We're getting really close, and it is so much fun to see the momentum building up and stuff like that. And we're going to talk about two things today. We're going to talk about the Carolina Hurricanes, which is a fascinating team to talk about, and we're also going to talk about what I wrote in my blog today, which are the 6 teams I think that have a legitimate chance of making the playoffs who didn't make it last year. And we'll also get into maybe the teams that they might be knocking out. I was going through it, and basically over the last 10 years or so, we've had 1 to 3 teams, but never more than 3 teams. Usually one, honestly, 1 or 2 teams at the most. I think there's one season with 3 teams where you see the playoffs, the 16 teams change from year to year. It is incredible how consistent it has been, very consistent in different situations. But yeah, this one this year could be a lot more, perhaps. I mean, there are some teams. We'll get into that for sure. And maybe we'll start there. Let's start there. Actually, that might be the better place to start, given that I may have to run at some point here. But yeah, so I'm going to give you my 6 teams. You guys tell me if you disagree with these 6 teams or you think that there's other teams that should be included.
I'm sure I will.
Yeah, I'm very used to that. It's okay. You're allowed to disagree. It's encouraged. All right, so I think these are pretty obvious. The Islanders.
Now, these are ones that you're saying that are going to make it or not?
These are 6 teams with the best chance of making it. They did make it last year. The Islanders, the Senators, the Jets, the Jackets, the Knights, or the Canucks. So I've got Knights, Canucks, Jackets, Isles, Sens, and Jets. Those are the 6 teams.
I think that's a great list.
It is.
I mean, it's those are teams all, they have a shot. I mean, I don't, some are greater than others, but I like that list.
I think they're all on the cusp. I think that they think that's reasonable. Now we can debate which one we think is closest.
Yeah, so my closest, I'll start there. We can get debating, because agreeing with me, it freaks me out a little bit. I appreciate it. Number 1, for me, the closest team is the Islanders, and I think this is because the Islanders were not only the most disappointing team last year and the team that everybody thought would make it last year, they were also the best team in the Metro Division over the last 3 months of the season, in record wise. If you just do the last 3 months, they were number 1 in the division.
Yeah, so, when all the weight was really off of them because nobody was paying attention. I mean,
true, but they still did that. And I often look when I'm making my predictions. I often look at the last couple months of the season the year before, because I do think that matters a little bit to see where a team's heading.
That was the case. The Toronto Maple Leafs of like a decade ago would be the Stanley Cup favorite because they always played great in the last 2 months when it didn't matter. But Kev, this is the thing about the Islanders, because I'm doing a preview on them today for like a freelance thing. They didn't make any changes. I mean, other than Alexander Romanov, they didn't make any change. They signed their own guys, but this is essentially the same team that fell behind by 25 points. Now we know the schedule and everything else, but they didn't make any changes, and that's why I can't put them high on this list when it comes to like eking their way into the playoffs.
Well, what Eckley doesn't know, because we didn't talk about it, was yesterday we had problems with a story that I was going to write for Hockey Buzz that didn't get published, and I ended up posting that one instead of the one that I was about to write. which was going to be on the teams from each division. I was picking one team that I thought could make the playoffs.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh no, not at all. I didn't write it, so it's fine.
I would like to hear yours too.
But my team from the Metro Division was going to be the New York Islanders. And my argument is simply this. There are two major changes they've made. They've got a different coach who I think is going to unlock the offense a little bit, enough, and still try to maintain defensive. But my biggest reason is Sorokin. I think Sorokin is an elite level goalie, and I think we're going to see an even better Sorokin as he, continues to sort of figure out what the NHL is all about. And goaltenders make a difference. And when we saw the NHL Network top 10 goalie list, he was certainly high on that list, and I think deservedly so. And I think he's going to be better. And they've got, we talk about the importance of two goalies, and I think they've got two exceptional goalies. And I still think, that even though they made only one addition, I think Romanov is a really good fit within this division. He makes big hits. He gets the crowd into it. He gets his team into it. He plays with a lot of passion, a lot of energy. I think he's going to give this defense a little boost. Like, he's not a perfect defenseman, far from it, but he has an element that I think sort of brings out the best in players around him, because they're trying to match his passion, because he is a very passionate player.
Yeah, I would place the Islanders 4th or 5th on this, because while their goaltending tandem is great, I mean, I think Sorokin is a world-class goalie, and Varlamov is terrific with them. No issue there. Even if they unlock some of the offense, which they should, because I think Barzal will have a better year, they were still 10th worst in scoring. Romanov's not going to help a lot on the scoring end. They're going to have to unlock a lot on the scoring end and still maintain the defense. Like, that's a balancing act that not every team can do in the toughest division in hockey. It is the toughest division in hockey, and just about every team has gotten better. So, that's why 4th or 5th on the list for me. It is
a 4th or 5th on the list. So it is, I mean, I just looked it up again, in the top 5 teams in the Metro winning percentage since February 1st. The Islanders were .580, the Rangers .555, Carolina .548. So they were right up there. They were the top since February 1st of last year. I do think that, I agree with Kevin on Sorokin. Obviously, you guys know I'm a big Sorokin fan. I've been all over Sorokin. But I really, at the end of the day, I think Romanov makes a big difference. And this is why the Islanders, talking to Islanders people, our buddy Dan, watching the Islanders quite a bit, they desperately missed the quarterbacking that they got from their defense to get their offense going. It was one of those things they needed and Romanov is a really good transitional defenseman who's
he is, but he's not a power play quarterback.
Yeah, he's not
a
power play quarterback, but but a transitional defenseman. That's where they were struggling the most.
I've seen Romanov a lot because he was in the Atlantic Division, and I think he's a good young defenseman. He's not Nick Leddy. He's not Devin Tapes. He's not a puck lugger that they were missing, and I think they're still missing that. Is he an improvement on their defense? I mean, does he provide more mobility than Zdeno Chara? Of course he does. Yeah. Does he have a little bit of Darius Kasperitis in him, where he's like a guy who likes to throw the big hit? Yeah, I think so. So I think he will help improve that blue line. Sure. But I think Russ's point is right on. They couldn't score consistently. And they didn't really. Now, if you see growth in Wahlstrom, if Barzal has a really good year, then maybe they end up middle of the pack. But other than Philadelphia, every team in the Metro Division either stayed where they are or got better. So I don't know. I'm a doubt, and it's tough to say that Lambert is going to be a better coach than Barry Trotz, because we talked about how good of a coach Barry Trotz is, and I didn't pick up on the fact that it was stale there in the with the Islanders. They just needed a change, and I can't say they're going to be better. I can't say they're going to be worse. I don't know.
Well, it's hard not to say that it wasn't stale when you look at how their offense was. At the end of the day, and also definitely what happened.
And they have a lot of aging players, Zach. They do.
Yeah, I agree with almost everything Mike said, but my conclusion is just different. I think they were 23rd in scoring. That's not nearly good enough. I think they could get into the middle of the pack. I think if you could squeeze up and maybe cut that, rise by maybe 10 places, that would be enough.
Yeah.
And I think you can do that by unlocking. I mean, we all know that Barzell is capable of creating a lot more offense than we've seen from him.
Yeah.
And I think they can do that. I think a lot of guys didn't have their best seasons last year. So I think their growth is going to be. I think they got off to a bad start, and it just continued to kind of weigh them down. I do think they were better than they showed.
I think you need a pre-ACL injury Anders Lee to bounce back, or Josh. But you need 2 or 3 of the guys who had sort of subpar years, much better years. And if that's the case, then they're in the mix for the playoffs.
If they have much better years, they win the division. If they have somewhat better years, they can make the playoffs.
Right.
I mean, that's where I'm at with them. Like if they have much better years, like Barzell's going to be better. He's just.
I'll also say this: just the fact that they decided they didn't want any PTOs on a team that has trouble scoring. That's a bad mindset to have to be it so close that you're like, hey, we're good. Yeah. We know we were bad last year. Flip it a switch. We're good. Like, Russ, I would look at guys, even if you're not going to sign them.
Russ, you would think that a Long Island native like Sonny Milano, who can score,
anybody, and they need help on the wing. It's not like they're a scoring machine here.
Yeah,
they're not.
No. I mean, they might still jump in on one of these PTOs, as it goes along.
Well, I mean, and you don't have to have them in camp to sign them. I keep pointing that out. And if we want, I can go back and list you 15 guys who played for other teams that got signed not by the team they were on.
I just think it's a mindset, Kev. They're basically, they have this defensive mindset like last year didn't happen, and that's fine. But
I'll let Russ talk for himself. Of the 3, it was three West and 3 East teams, right? The Islander. Of the 3 East teams, I think Columbus is the one that has the best chance of making the playoffs after missing it last year, because obviously Goudreau, now they've got Line A locked up. Gabranson provides them at least some little bits of stability on the blue line. I think Merzlikins and more specifically Korpisalo, after an injury-plagued season, are going to be better in net. It all depends with them on whether Sillinger builds on a good rookie season and whether Kent Johnson can play up the middle at 19 or 20 years old, whatever age he is. If that happens, then I think they challenge for a playoff spot. Ottawa, Russ, I know you like them a lot. I still question their defense, and I don't know whether their goaltending, which is better and more stable, can improve them enough to get in the playoffs.
I'll say this about Columbus. I do think the goaltending is just a little above NHL average. That's where I think Merzlikins is, which is fine. I do think Goudreau, adding him is major, because now their top 6 is a really formidable top 6, especially with Patrick Laine now with security there. You've got somebody, if they line up together, great. If not, there's a lot of other guys. Ken Johnson can score. Ken Johnson can make plays. Even if he's not going to be the Calder guy, he's going to have an impact. Kirill Marchenko is going to have an impact. He's coming over from the KHL. He's 22. That's an instant guy that you could insert that plays a two-way game, that is very offensively talented. So besides the other moves they made, they did add some youth too. And I think this is a really good mix. And right now, this is, as good as I felt about Columbus in a while.
Well, I have them at number 5 on my list of the 6 teams. Number 2 I have is the Vancouver Canucks. I think they're the second most likely team to make it.
I'll fly in the face of everybody, and I think Vegas still is, of the 3 West teams, is the one that has the best chance of making the playoffs. I mean, I know the goaltending. I have more confidence in Logan Thompson based on a 3-week situation, and now they have at least have Aiden Hill and Brasseux as a backup. I think Thompson's probably going to end up being the starter, and we're going to see a fully healthy, knock on wood, Jack Eichel. I think they could bounce back. I mean, if they don't get as many injuries as they did last year, then they have a really good chance of being in the top 3 in the Pacific.
Yeah, Kevin, who's your next one?
Well, I didn't know we're ranking them based on the six that you mentioned to go in.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
I'm
this is
saying
like
the most
yeah.
likely. To me, the most likely is the Islanders. Who's your most likely?
Out of that group, I probably would take the Islanders only because they have been there not so long ago, and most of those guys on the team kind of know what that's all about, and their goaltending is proven. So I'll go with them. Number two, so we have
Vancouver, Ottawa, Vegas, Columbus, Winnipeg.
I love Vancouver. They have, last year, like I didn't understand why they weren't better. I mean, a lot of people were predicting the Canucks were going to be good last season. It didn't happen. So I will go. I will go with Vancouver. I love Columbus. I just think they're a little bit farther away.
Yeah,
Like Jarmo Kekalainen has drafted very well, especially in the recent years. And Kent Johnson, as Russ pointed out, is a terrific player, but he's not ready now. At least that's what people are telling me in Columbus, that he'll contribute.
He'll contribute though. He will.
Yeah. No, that's what people are saying. But we'll see. Guys surprise you. You don't quite know what's happened to them in the summer, but they've got a lot of young talent. I don't love Columbus's defense right now.
Yeah.
I do believe in Merzlikins, or Merzlikins, I guess it is. He's in my book right after the top 10 goalies. He's right in that next 5 group. Like I think he's above average. So I would put him in the 11 to 15 group right there. I really think he does a good job. But a team that I'm really like are the Ottawa Senators. So they're a team that I think of all the moves they made, and they made a lot of good ones, the one that doesn't get enough attention is the Cam Talbot move. I really think that solidifies their goaltending. I thought last year Forsberg was a very underrated goalie.
Yeah.
I've got a note in my notebook today about the fact that, I think one of the hardest things for a fan base to appreciate is good goalies playing for poor teams. And you look at last year, Forsberg's, goals prevented above the average number, which is a statistic that I like. It's particularly high. And there's only 2 goalies who didn't make the playoffs that make it into the top 20 rankings in that. And he's one of them. So I think the Senators goaltending is going to be good enough. I love the DeBrincat acquisition. I love the Drew signing. They've just done so much in the off season, and their defense could still use some work. And Sanderson's probably isn't going to be the player that he's going to be even in a couple of years. But I think they've got a shot if Boston falters.
Yeah, that's the one. Right?
And pretty much the top of that Atlantic Division is all kind of taking some hits. No Ryan McDonough, no Palat in Tampa Bay. Florida, we're not quite sure what they're going to be. I mean, looks like they're just where they were last year, but we don't know for sure.
No.
Toronto with Mikheyev gone and the goaltending situation.
The goaltending, yeah. So, I mean, why not? I mean, they're going to have to improve significantly.
And I think in the other division, I think Washington's the big question mark in terms of them being able to, Ovechkin is Ovechkin, but, without Backstrom, with the goaltending, Kemper is probably an improvement over Vanacek and in terms of stability. But again, Kemper always gets hurt, and, that's always a consideration with him. I'll tell you, I mean, I love Vancouver in the West. But because they have Demko, and just like Ottinger with Dallas, you can use the same argument that we use with Sorokin. When you have a goaltender like that who can play 55 to 60 games, and if he plays as he did last year, then that's that covers a lot of ills. I think it's with them, it's just consistency offensively, and because top end with Besser and with with the talent that they have, they can outscore a lot of teams, but it's. At certain times they didn't score for long stretches, and then they would blow up. So that and now they have JT Miller locked up. The question is, are they going to get Horvat locked up, or are they going to trade him, or what's the deal with that? So
well, let me bring up what I said when all that mess started last year. When everybody's saying, well, they can't possibly sign all those guys. They don't got enough money. It'll never work out. Somebody's got to go. Besser's got to be traded. And what did I say? Jim Rutherford's there. He figures these things out.
Yeah.
He figures these things out. I don't have any doubt that he's going to re-sign Bo Horvat. No doubt whatsoever. They will figure it out. And that will be, by the way, all of the guys, all of whom who were rumored to be traded, none of them went anywhere. And I think that really speaks to their belief that this group is going to come together, and I think it will. I mean,
he should be the easiest to sign, Horvat.
Exactly.
He's the captain.
So. Well, and he's the easiest to sign because all those other guys have some uniqueness about them, some talent that in the comparables, but his comparables are intangibles,
right?
Leadership, or he plays well against the players, top players in the other team, those kind of things. It's a little bit harder to measure. So, and I think he wants to be there. So I'm sure they'll get it together, but it's going to take some time because it's tricky. They're going to have to give him enough to make him happy, but not enough to, make it their cap situation worse than it already is.
Yeah. I mean, so I like you guys. Well, I think, Vegas second, Ottawa third. I kind of feel like you guys do, but I put Vegas at fourth. Vegas to me is a tough team. That when we look at the whole thing, it is. I'm a Logan Thompson fan as well. Mike, definitely am. I really think that it's funny because he is the fourth highest paid goalie on that team. But he is but there he sits, as the guy who's going to be the savior of that team. He's got 3 goalies that are making more money ahead of him.
And they have him signed for 3 years too.
Signed for 3 years.
Even Allmark's making the money in Boston, and he's not.
I know that's how it goes, right? But they're going to have all this money in these backups, and obviously Leonard not playing. Their top end talent is the best on this list, is Stone and Eichel and Pietrangelo, but their depth is the worst. So it's that's why you sit there, and to me, their bottom 6 is really, really weak. And I think this is the result of watching an expansion team finally come to fruition a little bit. Of all the things they've done, they have not built a long-term thing for this team because they got so much success so quickly. They haven't developed this.
Can you say the 6 again when you're done? So then I'll give the 6 in order.
Yeah. I'll do it right now. And then because it's interesting to me, I put Columbus at 5, and at 6 I put Winnipeg, and I want to talk about Winnipeg for a second. I haven't mentioned
Winnipeg is 6 on my list too.
Yeah, right. They're 6 on my list too. I would put Jersey at 7 if I was have a 7th team, but I think that's pretty far off the distance, and I have a tough time putting Winnipeg on there too.
I mean, the thing with Winnipeg, as with Vancouver, is they have Hellebuck. So Hellebuck is, if he has the Hellebuck type year, but I mean, right now, you're probably depending on Cole Perfetti to step in and be effective right away.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Russ, do you think he's ready for that?
I mean, it'll be like Johnson. He will definitely contribute. I don't think he's going to have an amazing year. I think he'll be good. Just like I think Johnson will be good, and then if something happens, it happens. But I think he'll be respectable.
And that's a locker room. There were people in the chat were saying, "Well, Vegas's locker room was, toxic." Well, Winnipeg's wasn't exactly
It was split last year.
I think Winnipeg's is worse than Vegas.
It's worse. I got a real taste of that in Philly when they sort of delayed coming out after a game and then picked certain players to talk about it. You could tell that there were issues because they were trying to go on a little run last year to try and make the playoffs, and they didn't. So, Winnipeg's last on my list too because they do have the most issues.
Their big addition was Sam Gagner, we all agree is a good signing for that, what he got him for. But that's not. They needed more than that, and losing,
they were hoping that a coaching change would change the chemistry, and sometimes
it might.
And
the amazing thing about them is that Kyle O'Connor probably had the quietest 47-goal season of anybody in NHL history.
Well, plus he was second in the league in even strength goals. I think that's a measurement of when you can score at even strength in this league and you don't need the power play.
I know it's a big deal.
Yeah,
and he had only had 4 penalty minutes, which
it's insane the year he had. I mean, but no one talked about it because Winnipeg was so struggling and all back and forth and up and down.
Well, their defense still isn't fantastic. Heck, it's not.
Right?
No.
The Nate Schmidt move backfired. They're spending almost $6 million on him. They got him for a 3rd round pick, and that there was a reason they got him for a 3rd round pick. He just didn't fit in Vancouver.
I mean, so I'll give my list now that I know the 6, and I'll rank them. I do have the Knights first because even though they are least with depth, they just have too much talent. Logan Thompson is definitely at least NHL average, and I don't know if they need more than that because of the overwhelming talent that they do have. I can't bank on them not being healthy as a reason to not make the playoffs. Like, I can't do that. So that division's kind of easy too. So if guys get banged up and they have to come in and out, I think they'll be in the mix. I have the Canucks second because I also feel like they do have all the tools. Nobody's even talked about Quinn Hughes yet, and Quinn Hughes is one of the most dynamic players out in the West. But yeah, with Demko, with everything else they have, with Podkolzin, I think, who will be a factor this year, offensively and defensively, he's good on both. I think that helps. I've got Columbus next. I talked about Columbus. I've got the Islanders next. I talked about them. I really do like the Sens too. I like everything they did. That maybe it'll take a little bit to gel. I don't know, but I like all their parts. I like everything they've added. And even a guy like Sanderson, he might not score a lot of points this year, but he's a hybrid defenseman who literally could play anywhere you put him. So whatever that other spot is that they want to put Jake Sanderson, that's where they're going to put him. And I still think there's a chance Jacob Bernard-Docker makes that team too. And he is a defensive defenseman, and he's not like a 20-year-old kid. He's out of college. So I think that helps him a little bit too. And then Winnipeg, I just think there's too many issues. I think first season, I think it's kind of like a possibility that they make the playoffs. I like Bonus, but I don't know. He's got a lot of work to do.
But before we go to Carolina, I've got some breaking contract news.
Yep.
Elliot Friedman reports that Sean Dursey, who is a restricted free agent defenseman, has signed a 2-year deal at $1.7 million. He had, I think, 26 or 27 points with LA as a rookie. He's the kid that LA got in the Jake Muzzin deal from the Leafs, 2nd round pick, good prospect, right-hand defenseman. Russ, this sets the market for Rasmus Sandin because he had a better year. He had a better year than Sandin has had in the last 2 years, and he only got 1.7. So I don't think it's the money. I think it's the playing time. And I was up in.
Well, it's got to be the money when you just said what you said. I mean, the agent's going to walk in and say, "How can you offer us $900,000 when
they're not offering him? Not offering him $900,000. They're offering him the same deal as Liljegren, $1.4 million for 2 years.
Yeah, I don't know if he's going to take less, unless they're guaranteeing playing time, which they're not going to do.
If they're not guaranteeing him playing time, then they're probably offering him a 1-year deal. And the thing is, that makes no sense because they need him to play. And if he's going to be the 7th defenseman, he's not going to play.
I still think there's some murkiness there. I do.
Okay.
With Dursey, now it's pretty clear to me that what they did with Mikey Anderson is the old wink, we'll get you next year.
Kevin LeBanc.
I hope. You got to hope that because if
I think that's what it is.
Mikey, I'm not real pleased right now because basically what you say, what I do, you don't seem to value. Am I supposed to take more risk next year so I can get more points?
Yeah,
right.
So.
I mean, I think that's what they're doing, though. I think this was the only way they could get their young core fit in with their other high salaries.
Yes.
And I think that's why they did it that way. And
the reason they got Dursey on the 2-year deal is because he's more of an offensive defenseman and power play quarterback type.
Yeah.
He's going to score more points. He's going to cost more. So with Anderson, he's probably going to score 15 to 20 points, but he's a shutdown guy.
Yeah.
And, they'll try to get him locked up next year. Like we said, it's like the Kevin LeBanc thing in San Jose.
Yeah.
Wink,
I
wink.
think it's exactly the same thing.
Yeah,
now, the other thing I would point out now, I'm not suggesting that it's easy to do this, but there's no rule that says just because some other team paid some other player a certain amount that you have to do it. But we always talk in those terms because they're comparables, so those get argued. But we have a case, and we're not positive because Steve Yzerman doesn't talk. But in Detroit, we're guessing that Dylan Larkin is using all the comparables of this summer to say what I'm worth, and Steve Yzerman says, I don't care. I pay my guys based on what my team is doing. Now again, I don't know that's what's going on, but that's usually the read in those situations where, you have your own. There's what's going on in the league, and there's a lot of fairness, and people think that's the fair way to do it. You compare yourself to the other players around the league. Seems fair to me, but not everybody abides by that. So.
No.
I think the drawback for Larkin is he never reached superstar status. He's kind of like in that star category, very, very good center. And I think that's where
a superstar, Russ. I mean, I thought he was a star. I mean, I thought that's what he was, right? Like he's a star.
He's not
player.
a superstar.
I don't think he's a superstar either. There's still even debate. And I love the guy. He just had a great year last year. He's a good leader. He's popular. He skates like the wind. He's a 2-time 30+ goal scorer. But he didn't have a monster year last year. No. He had a good year, a very good year.
I think this is where Yzerman has leverage, because it's not like you could put Larkin in the same realm as Sidney Crosby and guys who are making that big of money.
No.
Then he's in that next tier where there's a lot of play.
You can put him in the same category as like other captains and with other teams like Ryan O'Reilly in St. Louis. He's making 7, or Gabriel Landeskog with Colorado, who's making 7. I think that's if you get him.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly what Yzerman is doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm guessing. I mean, I don't really know. But
no, it makes complete sense.
And I'm sure Larkin is saying, I want to get paid by that contract that the St. Louis Blues just signed yesterday.
Yeah, but those are guys. I mean, Larkin's what? He's 2014 draft, so he's like 26.
Right.
So and Thomas and Kyrou are a couple years younger. I don't think Yzerman's going to have a problem giving him 8 years at 26. That's still age 34. But do you think Thomas and Kyrou are more dynamic offensively? So
production-wise, but it's hard to match the way Larkin flies.
Larkin's a number 1 center, so he does have more responsibilities, and he does them well. That's different than the other 2 guys you talked about who don't have that same responsibility as being a number 1. So you have to weigh that too.
He's also more important to Detroit than those guys are to St. Louis. I mean, they're good players.
That's true.
But,
all 3 of them are important, but
they're all important. But
it's. It's a difficult thing, but we don't know, that's the case either. We'll have to see.
The other thing is in the PTO cavalcade, Russ, this is funny. The Ottawa Senators have invited former Islanders first-round pick Michael Dal Cole as a PTO, but the other one is Derek Brassard. This is old home week. You remember Derek Brassard was traded to Ottawa when they were going for the cup a few years ago for some guy named Zibanejad.
Yeah, but that was, let's be fair, that was a salary dump in a sense, because they knew he was a good player. They knew they couldn't pay him, so they were looking for somebody they could put in the lineup. The Rangers took advantage of him. I mean, but they took advantage of a team that didn't have any money at the time. That's really, I don't know if Ottawa thought that Zibanejad would be a number 1 center. I did when they made the trade. Maybe they did, but either way, they couldn't pay him. So that's why I don't rip him for that. But I don't know if Brassard will actually make that team. Dal Cole's an interesting one, because Dal Cole can be a very effective 4th liner with size, who has enough hands that once in a while can get some points. He has just not had regular playing time.
Now,
one thing I wanted to bring up just before we move on from those teams. You mentioned before, the one problem I have out in the Pacific is, who's going to move out to allow those teams to move in. And, I brought this up last year, and I know Russ didn't believe in it, but it really is true. When you have teams at the bottom that are not any good, as the Central Division does, the teams at the top of that division score more points. I mean, that's just the fact. And that causes issues in terms of being able to get, if you have good teams, to being able to get teams to, either hold off, getting 4-4 at least, at the very least, or grabbing that 5th spot in the Central Division. You're going to have 2 very weak teams. The teams at the top are going to really eat up those points. So it is going to be interesting to see what happens in the Pacific, where I think there's going to be more teams that are going to sort of beat up on each other. So will we get a 5-3? we're going to get a 4-4 for sure.
Yeah, I think so.
But
I will say that
LA.
The Central does have better teams overall. There's really only 3 teams that I don't think will make it in the Pacific, but the other ones are all pretty good as far as being really competitive. You make a good point on that this year, because I look at the Sharks. The Sharks are going to be like, eh.
Yeah, but they're going to be more competitive.
Yes.
Yeah, they'll be a little more competitive.
Yeah.
Ducks will definitely be more competitive, but I don't think we'll make it. Seattle is sort of building slow. So
Arizona will be a cakewalk.
Yeah, so Arizona and the Blackhawks are complete cakewalks, but then Winnipeg's not, and nobody else is. So
right.
Yeah,
I think the teams that were on the cusp last year, LA was third in the Pacific, and Nashville and Dallas didn't lock up wild card spots until the final week of the season. Those are going to be the teams that are going to be probably going to the last week before they clinch a playoff spot or lose a playoff spot.
Who do you think is going to get knocked out, Kevin? I mean, like, who's going to get knocked out?
No, I think it's certainly not going to be LA or Calgary. I don't think. So it's got to be LA.
Could be Edmonton.
No. What I meant to say, I don't think it's going to be the Alberta teams.
Right.
But I think LA is vulnerable.
they are vulnerable still, I think.
Yeah, they're still. They still got to. Who knows? We don't know what they're young. The Kings have had all these younger players for a long time now. And none of them really have emerged.
Yeah, they haven't broken through like you.
Yeah,
they were a +3 differential. You'd think they would have been better than that. So
Well,
they're playing. So they probably won a lot of close games. They
need Byfield to take a big step.
Yeah,
Fiala coming in after the trade to score a bunch of goals. They need, and the one thing, Doughty was out for half a season. He's one of the best defense.
They're a different team when Doughty's in there, no doubt.
Yeah.
One other thing before we talk Carolina, Frank Cervalli reported, and this is lost on you, because it's baseball. Freddie Freeman, the talk during the season. Sorry.
I do know baseball.
The talk during the season was that he was offered a deal by the Atlanta Braves, who he won a World Series with, that his agent did not tell him about, and then he had signed with the Dodgers. Now, I don't know if that's been refuted or not, but that was out there, and it's been out there.
There's a lawsuit now with it, so I think it has been refuted to some degree.
So Frank Cervalli is reporting that Evan Rodriguez was offered a 3-year contract for $10.5 million at the beginning of free agency in July, and that was passed on, and now he changed his agent, and as we talked about a few days ago, he signed a 1-year, $2 million deal with Colorado. So that's sort of similar to
this. Is where you run into trouble, and this is similar to the other one, because once the agent got dropped, then the lawsuit began because the agent lost money. So I don't know what to say about
who offered this deal.
They didn't say. They didn't say who.
Yeah, if you say who and you don't get it 100% right, then you end up having the problem that the other reporter's having now in baseball. So Frank did the right thing by not saying who, but again, to me, it's like, I don't care. If
you ask me, it's probably a team that had a lot of cap space, like an Arizona or I don't know. It's probably not a team that is tight up against the cap, but it's probably a team that has a lot of cap space for a lot of years. And I think Rodriguez would have been smart to take the long-term money after having a good year in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Now he could win a Stanley Cup in Colorado, and he could use that as a springboard.
And that could give him a raise. He's banking on himself. He's been banking on himself for a few years now. So
I think this happens a lot more than we know.
Oh, sure.
And I think a lot, and I think often doesn't get to the player at all. It doesn't get, just doesn't get to the player at all. Like, I think the player.
I can see that. Sure.
I've had people tell me that they made an offer and the player never heard about it. I've had that happen, so I think that does happen.
I know other podcasts wanted Mike, but they never. Mike is still here.
Yeah,
I think too. You run into problems, and I've heard this. I don't know the legal ramifications of this, but I know of an instance where if you're represented by an attorney versus being represented by a non-attorney, if you're being represented by an attorney, he has an obligation, an ethical obligation to present that to you.
Right.
If you're being just represented by a non-attorney. I mean, he may have a moral obligation, but he doesn't. It's the attorney-client privilege.
Right, privilege, right.
So I don't. That's what was explained to me, actually by an attorney.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, and some of these guys sign power attorney over to these guys too. I've heard that happen too. That happens as well. So, which is insane. But people do sign power attorney and partial power attorney over to people. So it's like that's.
I do know for sure in my career, I've had agents admit to me that they turned down offers and then found that they didn't get an offer that was as good as the one they turned down.
Yeah, that's definitely happened.
They play the market, and sometimes they lose.
They lose. Yeah, that's exactly right. Where I've had people say, "Well, they offered me X at certain time," and then they said, "No, we're going to play the market." And then when they go back to it, says, "Yeah, we'll take that now." The guy says, "We don't have any money left."
Right.
So where the haziness comes in all this is like, I knew a situation one time where a guy was told that, like, let's use Chicago. Like Chicago, the agent said, Chicago put an offer out there for you, but it's terrible. We're not going to take it. And he said, okay. And they wouldn't even know what it was. Like he didn't even know what the offer was. It just said it was terrible. And then later in the day, it was the same thing admitted to me, Kevin, that that offer was better than the offer he eventually took. But I don't know that the player ever knew what that offer was. I don't know that the player ever knew that was because these guys they don't always say when an offer was made. They don't always ask for the numbers. They just say
but I would say this. I would say most of the time it's going to go in the agent's favor where he makes more money for the client. But it does happen the other way sometimes, no doubt.
I don't know why. As somebody that just believes in transparency as a general rule, I don't know why you wouldn't, if you're a team, tell an agent, I'm going to send it to you, but I'm sending a copy to the client.
Yeah.
Fair,
he's our player. I'm trying to re-sign him, or we're trying to bring him in. It's just the way I do business. I'm only going to deal with you. I'm not going to call him, but when I send my offers out, I send it only. I send it to both you and the player. So
I think that would be great.
They should do that, but I think that a lot of time they feel like they're going to embarrass the agency.
Well,
he represents me and all this stuff.
The problem with that is like if an agent says to the team, "Well, I don't want you to do that," then I'm going to go, "Why?"
Right.
What are you
of course,
hiding? Like, what are you hiding?
But then he's going to say, "Well, that's bad." The agent is going to say, "Well, you don't want to negotiate with the player directly. That's that's bad blood."
And I would say, I'm not going to call him. I'm going to negotiate with you.
Right.
But I want them to know, what I have offered, and to see that it's, that it's legitimate, and I want to make sure you get it right. So.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, but that's what agents are saying. They're like, they're going to play that card. Arbitration is never good. So they always say for the same reason, because of players in that, that's the argument they always make, but that burns bridges. Let's get to Carolina though, because we do have to get to Carolina. So, what an interesting offseason they had, Kevin. I'm like, this is Don Waddell's most interesting offseason by far.
Yeah, and when it's all said and done, there were some bad things that happened. If you talk to fans, like, they're not happy they lost Niederreiter.
Right.
And some people wanted to keep Trocheck. But on balance, I think if you're trying to win, you got to like everything that happened. Brent Burns is still a beast. It's he adds to that already good defense. They've got younger players coming up that are gonna, in theory, help them. And they're gonna be better players next year. And they got it. Next year they're gonna have the goalie that they didn't have last year. So at least in the playoffs, they didn't have him.
Right.
But I think they feel, pretty good about it. They were a team on the rise, and they've added elements that are going to be in Pacioretty. They're trying to put a good spin on that. I mean, that's a terrible loss. I mean, you acquire him, he was going to give you goals, and then all of a sudden he's out for most of the regular season. And, Waddell's immediate response was, well, this will be like our trade deadline acquisition. I get it. Makes sense, but that's spin. That's
total spin. I mean,
total spin.
You don't give up Niederreiter if this is going to happen, I think.
Yeah, they liked him. They just didn't want to give him what he wanted,
Right.
and of course Nashville didn't either.
Right.
He took less, and he only took 2 years, but the fans really liked his consistency. He played better in Carolina than he had played anywhere else. I think he really wanted to stay there. So, but I think on balance, and then the Stastny, I've pointed this out before, but they're exactly the same player in terms of winning faceoffs, number of points,
Right.
Defensive prowess. I think Trocheck's feistier, and he's quicker. But Stastny has his own locker room presence. He's very cerebral. Guys look up to him. The one worry you do have with him is, he's 100 years old in player years, and at some point the wheels do fall off. So I guess it could be this year, but there was no indication of that last season.
Yeah. And he's so smart. He's so smart. He's the kind of player that when he gets lower, he'll still adjust his game to fit that. He's a coach on the ice for these guys. I don't think there's any team that really loves their coach more than the Carolina Hurricanes love Brendan Moore. That's my feeling. Like when I look around,
I think that's fair. And as I pointed out before, the other uniqueness about him, he does not want to be involved in player decisions. They've tried to involve him and say, Waddell will say, I'd like to get your opinion on that. And usually the coaches want those sort of things, and he doesn't. He said, you make the management, I coach the players you give me. And, because, he thinks he's, I'm sure, biased. He begins to like players, and, there's guys he likes and guys he doesn't, I'm sure. And he just prefer to stay out of it. So
I interpreted the Paul Stastny addition as Neckish Kotkaniemi insurance, because maybe they didn't think Kotkaniemi was ready to be, or maybe ever ready to be, a number 2 center. He's probably a better fit as a number 3. And Neckish is maybe a little too young to take on the responsibilities that Trocheck had. So
this is what I would say about that. I talk a lot to the Carolina Hurricanes. The only time I've ever heard him mentioned as a possible number 2 center is on social media and from you. That has never come up.
Yeah,
they had always kind of envisioned him as projected down. And to be honest with you, I think Brendan Moore reached that conclusion pretty early in this thing. I think they like him for what he does, but I don't see them projecting. I've seen it a lot on social media.
That makes sense.
And Russ, I think Brent Burns, simply for stability reasons, is an upgrade over D'Angelo.
Yeah, I think so.
Him with Slavin and Shea and Pesci, that defense, I think, is more. So the top 4 is a lot more solid. Yeah. But I think the goaltending situation. Freddie, we don't know, as somebody who's an expert on Freddie Anderson from 5 years in Toronto. He was not at fault for some of the bad things that happened during his tenure there. But we don't know, other than Game 7 of the conference final with Anaheim back in 2015, Freddie Anderson has never made it past the first round. So we don't know what he is in terms of a playoff scenario, and we still don't know, and we have to find out this year. I mean, if he played like he did during the regular season, then they have a chance of winning the Stanley Cup, because he was fantastic during the regular season. But I don't know. Russ.
Here's what I would say. Look, Carolina's defense is always among the best in the league. Still is. Offense is good. I still wonder when we're going to get like big game performances out of Svechnikov and some of their other guys. Like, who is their Ron Francis? Like, nobody has really stepped up and has become that. Even Aho in the playoffs has not really become that. He's done that in the regular season. Then the other thing is, I just looked on Money Puck, and even for the last 4 years, Carolina never has a top 5 goalie in the playoffs as far as all the stats. Money Puck does like 12 stat categories. But it's guys like Shesterkin and Vasilevsky. It's guys that you would expect. 1 year, Ronta was 6th, and 1 year, Mrazek's 19. And I still think ultimately that is the big question mark and can still plague them, as good as their team is. So that's my whole problem with a buy-in on Carolina, is that
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is tricky. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
problem. And I think if Anderson plays last year, they would have won that first round of the playoffs. I do.
And I would agree with Russ. I mean, I've said this before, and when I open my mouth and say it, because he's been good, but I've been disappointed in Svechnikov. Like, I thought he was going to be greater. I thought he was going to be Ovechkin like. I mean, I really did.
That kind of talent.
Yeah, I mean, I
be
not that
something like that.
Not that he's bad, far from it. But with Russ, like, I thought he was going to get 40 plus goals every year. Like,
Yeah.
He's a legitimate top 6 forward, but we thought he was going to be a top 3 in something really.
And I thought Nekic was going to be better than he's been. Like, it's time for him to, be better than he is. So I know what Russ is saying. Like, there's guys just kind of leveled out in terms of when we thought they were going to be, better. But with regard to their goaltending, I'm going to invoke the Belfour clause, where everybody said he was absolutely horrible. He can't win the big game, terrible in the playoffs, never gone anywhere. Until he did, and then
I don't think either of these goalies are at the caliber of Ed Belfour, though. I don't.
Oh, well, Ed, I've got stories to prove it.
No, I know
Ed Belfour's caliber.
I would say
up until that point, when
I never thought of that as Belfour. Like, I always thought Belfour was a top-notch goalie, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, and there have been other goalies in Detroit. There was Chris Osgood.
Yeah.
Oh, he's terrible. He's terrible. He's terrible.
No, that's fair. Osgood is
he won the Stanley Cup. Yeah, so but that's kind of what happens. Sometimes you just don't have the opportunity, and we'll see. I mean, when the NHL Network did their top 10 goalies, I did a note on this. All the goalies that were kind of involved in the musical goaltenders, none of them, are in that list, but Freddie Anderson is. He
is. I know. Yeah.
So he was in the top 8. So.
Brent Burns gives them something that they haven't had in the last couple. Like, since, remember, they were a team that obviously won the Stanley Cup, didn't make the playoffs for 10 years, have now made the playoffs for 4 years. But in these 4 years of making the playoffs, they haven't had anybody as interesting to the fans as Brent Burns is.
I hope they like snakes.
What was that?
I thought you were going to say
snakes.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I thought you were going to say give them something you hadn't before, which is a traveling zoo.
No, that's true too.
Yeah,
but I absolutely have huge amounts of respect for him. But
lots of snakes.
I'll say this about Burns, where the D'Angelo fall off would happen would be in the playoffs when games got tougher, and he sort of would try and hit guys and do what he could to maintain his play, but it would fall off. Brent Burns can maintain that play because he does have some size to him, and he is used to that. To me, that's an upgrade because they needed sort of like playoff player, high caliber upgrade, and I think that's an upgrade for them for sure.
Well, I also think his belligerence is controlled. Anthony, he struggled a little bit with that. D'Angelo just. He lost control, where Burns, I don't think at this stage of his career, like anything he does is calculated. He's kind of got it all figured out. And, and his size, I mean, he's still a big man. He's still got a huge shot, all the above.
Yeah.
No,
he's just dynamic. So. He's a fun player to watch. He's a star. Like, to me, he's a star. He's just a fun player to watch. He just steps on the ice. He's there. It's obvious he's on the ice. You know what I mean? He has that Chris Pronger-esque type thing that just like comes in, and he's just.
And look, Seth Jarvis will take another step for them. I just like to see it.
It's fun to have him relevant again. It's fun to have him relevant. He wasn't relevant out there,
and it's fun to have him in the Eastern Conference. Like, from my perspective, like, he's been a Western.
Yeah, I would agree. I haven't seen enough of him.
He's
in
never
his career.
been Minnesota. But Russ, do you think that any of the I had like Jack Drury and Kochetkov and Noel Gunler as the guys who might be able to break through this year? Do you think?
I don't think Kochetkov as a numbers game is going to be able to at the beginning.
Right.
Gunler's close, but I don't think so. Jack Drury is the kind of guy, much like his dad, where you could put him in a role and he could play it. He's an excellent skater, and he's already really good two-way. He'll give you some points. If you put him in the right role, he'll give you more points. But if they're looking like they need a position filled, he could fill a position. So I think Jack Drury has the best chance.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're obviously a playoff team, when you look at it. I mean, Are they first or second in this division? I guess is the question. To
Yeah,
me,
they're first or second.
I think they're battling with the Rangers for top.
yeah, to me, that's the battle, right? It's between them
Don't
and the
say
Rangers.
Rangers, Mike, or Joe Morello is going to say, you're
I'll say
basically
Rangers.
Well, I mean,
doing something against the Islanders.
there's just a bunch of teams that can win that division, and
Yeah.
I mean, like Carolina can entertain the idea they can win the division, but they have to be afraid they won't even make the playoffs.
That's true.
That's the kind of division it is.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
You think that's legitimate? I don't think they are. I don't think they have to be afraid to not make.
Oh, I think everybody in that division has to be afraid. If
I
you
think you do because I think it's going to be so tight. Like Kevin's saying, you could have like a bad month
Or
and really be playing catch up all year.
or one key injury.
yeah, major injury. Yeah.
Yeah, if Sebastian Aho goes down for 2 months, then they might be out of the playoffs.
Or the
Yeah,
season.
Baltimore always keeps you consistent. Always keeps you top towards them.
Yeah. Well, I
To
think
me,
we're
there's
always
two
gonna
top.
be
There's two. The Rangers and the Carolina Hurricanes are the only two definites in my mind in that division.
don't you remember in the 90s when we used to say things like, if the Devils can make the playoffs,
Right.
they can win the Stanley Cup,
Right.
because they had a team that was built, but it was tight in the division races, and you never quite knew. And as somebody just pointed out, one key injury,
Yeah.
all it takes. And the Carolinas in that position now. Like, I would say chances are good.
Yes.
But don't you think there's some small possibility if the Islanders are better than we think, if the Devils are better than we think, Columbus rises up?
There's
Yeah,
definitely
I mean, there's a lot going on there. Like, there's going to be a lot of dividing of points and 3-point games, and I think there could be some nuttiness there. And I don't think they're going to miss the blast, but I wouldn't. Let's put it this way: I wouldn't bet my house that they're.
Listen,
Yeah.
the last month of the season could be a wild ride. You never know.
Yeah, you just don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the Metro is a bizarre division for sure. And like we talked about, the Capitals every team has question marks. With the exception of those two teams to me. But but beyond those two teams, I think that they could lose Aho and they could still make it to me. They could lose Anderson, they could still make it to me. I think that they're not. The Rangers could. Maybe the Rangers would. I think the Rangers would still make it even if they lost Shesterkin, but that could be tricky.
They don't have Georgiev anymore.
I know.
I don't even know who is their backup.
Oh, good question.
No, I was doing this.
It is Yaroslav Halak.
Halak,
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
And then
40-year-old
the Penguins,
Yaroslav
right?
Halak.
I mean, the Penguins, they could win the division. They could not, they could not make it too. I agree with that call on them, but they're right in the middle there. I think they're more likely to make it. I don't know. I think this division will be fascinating to watch. It might actually not be the best division at the end of the year. That's my prediction. In the NHL, it's been the best division for many years. I can see it not being the best division at the end of the year.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, I mean that's possible.
Well, the
In a weird
Central,
way, yeah.
I know the Central can't be the worst. Can't be the best division in the NHL since they have two of the worst teams in the division.
Right.
No, the Atlantic is on the way up. Like that. That's a division that's on its way up in a big way.
Yeah. There'll be fewer points with the top teams in the Atlantic, which is going to be interesting. See how that plays out. But I think ultimately that'll split 4-4 because the Metro is going to divide up their points too.
Yeah. And the last thing on that, Kevin, I do want to bring something you brought up before, so everybody's going to beat up on Chicago and Arizona in the Central. And I do think that that's true, but I do also feel that there's a certain thing, like I'll use Montreal as an example. Like Montreal is going to be bad, but they're still going to be hard for Toronto to play. They're still going to be hard for Ottawa to play. They're still the rivalries with Chicago are way deeper than the rivalries with Arizona. So even though Chicago and Arizona are both terrible, every time somebody plays Chicago, they're still playing Chicago. And
but how long?
Matters a little bit?
Yeah. No, I mean, I your point's well taken, but I just think, historically, whenever you have, say the worst 5 teams in the league and 2 of them are in one division, the teams in that division end up with more points because, they're winning. If Arizona, Chicago surprises us a little, and by that meaning, they end up closer to 500, then that'll adjust that. So. But
how long will Taves and Kane be there before they are traded? Because if they're
that's true too, and that's always a good point. Well,
yeah,
thanks, guys.
I think Taves is going to be hard to trade. So
yeah, you do. think he's going to end up there, but I think Kane won't be.
Nope.
Folks, remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you again tomorrow. Enjoy your rest of your Thursday.